What's up everybody, Kier Gomes here, and welcome back. As you can tell from the thumbnail, and as you can tell from the trailer, it's pretty obvious. Today we're taking a look at the Orbit Cardistry Con First Edition reprints. Now I've said this a lot in the past, I love the Orbit decks, I absolutely love them, and there's so many reasons why, and we're gonna get into most of that right now. Before we get started, please do drop a like on this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Without further ado, let's roll that intro and get you guys on your way.
Let's go.
All right, now for those of you that do not know, this deck is not the Orbit 7th edition that everybody is waiting for. That deck actually comes out later this month. This deck was a surprise from the Orbit group. They did a reprint of the Orbit 1st edition playing cards, which have long since been sold out. They're very rare. Now, if you're like me and you don't want to spend $100 on a deck of cards, this offered an amazing alternative for those who were able to attend Cardistry Con, and they will be available soon online for those who were not able to attend. I had this sent to me from my friends over at Doc's Playing Cards, so big shout out to them for sending me this deck. Since I wasn't able to make it to the convention this year, I had a very short list of decks that I was really excited about, and this was at the top of that list, so I'm so excited that I got it. Shout out to my friends over at Doc's, you guys are the best. All right, let's go. The tuck case is done pretty standard to how you would see any Orbit tuck case. It's got the kind of cigar band on the side. It says Orbit in the middle in this blocky white text. It's done in a matte paper stock, so it's not very glossy, and it's got this beautiful deep navy blue on it, and then if you look closely you can see there's that even darker blue ring going around it. One side of the deck has some distribution copy about Orbit. The other side of the deck says CC First Edition. CC of course stands for Cardistry Con. The bottom of the deck just has that original Orbit logo. The top of the deck, standard etiquette, just says 23. And the back of the deck is the back design of the cards. Now it also comes with a custom seal with that old school Orbit logo and says what number deck you have. So this is a numbered seal, which makes the deck very valuable and extremely rare. I know a lot of people would not open this deck, but I have a responsibility to you guys. I review cards, I only had the one, so had to open it. So you can see I have number 199 out of 1,000. Inside the tongue flap, you get that same Orbit message, says persist and endure. The deeper you gaze into the cosmos, the harder it is to look back. Then on the inside of the deck, you get hashtag the Orbit deck and their Instagram handle. But let's look at the cards. All right, so your back design is gonna be the same as you had it on the V1 Orbit. The only difference is that it's got thin borders, where the V1 Orbit had really thick borders. These ones are super thin, which I think makes the card look a lot more aesthetically pleasing. But basically, other than that, it is just your standard V1. So it's got that navy blue background with the white Orbit logo in the middle. This is before Orbit was doing the broken border swoosh, so it was actually kind of cool to see a new Orbit deck that didn't have that swoosh going through the border. The back isn't that different, the only difference is the border. The faces of the deck do have some significant differences, so let's talk about that. You're gonna get your standard Orbit Jokers that look like this. It is a play on the original bicycle deck with an astronaut riding a bike on the moon. And it says 23 in that stone off to the side instead of saying 808, which is what it says on the original rider backs. You get the new standard Orbit Ace of Spades, which is a spade pip with an astronaut inside of it. Again, we've seen altered variations of this design on past decks. Again, this is not what the original Ace of Spades looked like on the Orbit V1, and that Ace of Spades actually looked like this. In my opinion, it's a total upgrade. All right, now as far as ad cards and gaff cards, if you know Orbit, you already know what you're getting. You're gonna get a double backer, which is my personal favorite gaff card, and you're gonna get a duplicate 8 of Spades, which is always good as well. Now on every Orbit deck up until this one, the faces were completely Arco standard, minus some court card customs. Orbit is known for using not bicycle standard, but a more vintage Arco standard face of their card. However, on this deck, they actually did what looks to be Bicycle Standard instead of Arco Standard. So really interesting choice. I don't know why they did that. I like the Arco Standard, but it looks pretty good. So they look standard from the fan, which is good. Definitely a deck with some magic application. Your pips and indices look the same as you would find them on a bicycle deck, but they actually use standard Bicycle Standard faces for this deck, which I guess really does update it to being a modern reprint of an older deck. But the biggest difference for me between the Arco pips and the bicycle pips is the diamonds, because the diamonds here are a little bit more curvy, and on an Arco deck they're just straight lines. So now there are a number of custom court cards in this deck, more so than I've seen in any other Orbit deck in the past, so let's look at those. Your King of Hearts is actually the father of Orbit Brown, who's another magician. Custom King of Spades, which I believe is a first for the Orbit deck. Custom King of Clubs, also I believe a first for the Orbit deck. You have Nick, I can't pronounce his last name, Stumphauser, something like that, as the Jack of Clubs, as usual. You have your Queen of Diamonds, Jack of Hearts, and Jack of Spades. Got Sean O in there. Custom Queen of Clubs. Of course, you have Orbit himself as the Jack of Diamonds. And I believe that's actually all the customs in this deck. All right, so now we've talked about how the cards look. Let's switch angles and talk about how they handle. So, in terms of handling, by the way, I should mention, you probably already knew this deck was also designed by Daniel Snyder. He is the creator of Black Rose's playing cards, but also has designed the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and now this version of the Orbits. So this deck actually does feel unique to regular Orbit playing cards, and I'll show you what I mean. For the sake of contrast, we'll compare it to the stock and finish of the 5th edition, but it is the same as the stock and finish of the 4th, 5th, and 6th. So if you're familiar with the Orbit deck, especially any of their recent decks, you know that the stock actually feels pretty unique. It's advertised as Crushed Premium stock, but it does have kind of its own feel to it, and a lot of you have actually noticed that. I've talked to many of you about it. It's almost like the cards clump a little bit and then stop clumping. And it's Crushed Premium, but just kind of feels like it has its own finish. So this is kind of the Orbit stock and finish that we all have come to know. It's Crushed B stock or Crushed Premium stock, but just feels like its own kind of, it feels like its own thing. Like Orbit decks definitely feel different than a lot of other Crushed Premium decks. Now this deck, the new one, is also printed on Crushed Premium stock. However, it feels superior in every single way to the old Orbit decks, and the reason for that is because this deck was actually done using the web press process. So the printing process that this deck used is different from what the other Orbit decks have used. The best way I could explain it is it feels like that old like USPCC blue seal paper stock. Very, very like loose and slippery, and it holds up amazing. Now, obviously, I've tried not to use these cards too much before the review, as much as I can help it, but they do hold up great, I can tell you. In terms of the stock and finish, it feels like a blue seal deck of bicycles or tally hose or something, so you're really in for a treat with the stock and finish. In fact, I would have liked this deck either way, even if it was on the older paper stock. But on the new paper stock, I think that's actually my biggest selling point. That's a reason why I would spend the $30 to buy this deck again. It does feel amazing. You can see too, the cards are average thickness. They are crushed, but they're Crushed Premium, so it's gonna feel a little bit different. Show you what they look like in a fan. Not bad, nice and even. That's what it looks like if you fan it for the indices. These cards are modern cut, so they ferro top to bottom. When I got this deck right out of the box, it was very easy to spring, so just like newer USPCC decks, they don't require a lot of breaking in, they're nice and thin. And I know I say this every time a new Orbit deck comes out, but this has to be my favorite Orbit deck to date. Although I do love the Orbit designs in general, I love the more complex ones. I love the simplicity, I love the color of this deck. It's just this kind of bright navy blue. It's very vibrant. In terms of handling, it's just better than every previous version of the Orbit decks. And I like the Orbit decks a lot, so that must say something. You know what, let's just get a good slow motion spring in here. And there you go. Well guys, thank you so much for watching today's episode and my review of the Cardistry Con first edition reprints by Orbit. If you're interested in picking up this deck for yourself, it is currently available on eBay and it will be available soon on theorbitbrown.com, so keep an eye out for that. As always guys, please don't forget to drop a like on this video, and I hope you'll consider subscribing if you haven't for more awesome content just like this. With all that being said, I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their day. I know I will. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.